unpredictable. Another inquiry into matters that most wizards consider beneath their notice. Yet I suppose even the most elementary understanding of our world's magical institutions requires acknowledgement that Hogwarts, for all its supposed grandeur, stands merely as one pillar among many in the foundation of wizarding education. The arrogance of British wizardry has long obscured the existence of equally ancient, equally powerful centers of learning scattered across this globe. Very well. Since you appear incapable of conducting this research independently, I shall illuminate the shadows surrounding these 10 establishments, though I suspect the depth of their histories will prove challenging for some minds to fully appreciate. Let us begin with what many consider the most prestigious of these institutions, though such rankings are, naturally, matters of considerable debate among those who concern themselves with such things. Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, nestled somewhere within the Pyrenees Mountains of France, the precise location remaining concealed through methods that would take hours to explain to those unfamiliar with advanced protective enchantments. Beauxbatons Academy has cultivated excellence in magical education since approximately the 13th century. The exact date of its founding remains obscured by time, and one suspects a certain French tendency toward embellishment of historical records. The palace itself and, yes, unlike certain drafty Scottish castles, Beauxbatons operates from what can only be described as a palace, manifests as an architectural marvel that shifts subtly, depending upon the observer's position, and some claim their worthiness to perceive its full splendor. The grounds extend far beyond what Muggle geography would permit, folded through spatial manipulation spells of extraordinary complexity. Gardens bloom year-round, through combinations of herbological expertise and climate charms that British wizards have attempted, unsuccessfully, to replicate at Hogwarts for centuries. The current headmistress, Madame Olympe Maxime, stands as a formidable presence, both literally and figuratively, though certain biographical details regarding her heritage remain delicate subjects. Under her administration, Beauxbatons has maintained its reputation for emphasizing refinement, etiquette, and what the French rather pompously term magical aesthetics, the integration of beauty and function in spellwork. Students learn not merely to perform transfiguration, but to execute it with elegance. Potions are not simply brewed, but crafted with an attention to visual presentation that some, myself excluded, might consider excessive. The student body, drawn primarily from France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, wears robes of pale blue silk that somehow remain impractical for actual magical work. Their diet emphasizes French cuisine to a degree that borders on the obsessive, and their school mascot, a pair of golden Abraxan horses creatures of substantial size, requiring single malt whiskey for sustenance, flex their taste for the extravagant. What many fail to appreciate is that beneath this veneer of sophistication lies a rigorous academic program. Beauxbatons students routinely demonstrate exceptional skill in charms and transfiguration, and their approach to wand lore emphasizes flexibility and precision. The Academy's graduates have included numerous influential members of the International Confederation of Wizards, several renowned wand makers, and the creator of the Flamel transformation theorem, though whether Nicholas Flamel actually attended Beauxbatons remains disputed among historians, with apparently nothing better to occupy their time. The school maintains particular strength in alchemy, a subject that most British institutions abandoned decades ago, due to the difficulty of finding qualified instructors. Their library contains one of the world's most comprehensive collections of alchemical texts, second only to certain private collections I shall not name. Students in their final years may pursue specializations in fields ranging from magical architecture to experimental transfiguration, programs that Hogwarts lacks entirely. Durmstrang Institute. If Beauxbatons represents magical education flavored with refinement, Durmstrang embodies the opposite approach. Power pursued without apology, knowledge sought regardless of its darkness. Located somewhere in the northernmost reaches of Europe's Scandinavia, according to most sources. Though some claim Bulgaria, Durmstrang's precise location remains even more carefully guarded than Beauxbatons. The castle itself occupies a position of deliberate isolation, surrounded by mountains and forests that have claimed the lives of those foolish enough to approach uninvited. Founded sometime prior to the 13th century by the witch Nerida Volchanova, who would later meet an unfortunate end at the hands of her own students. Cautionary tale regarding the dangers of teaching overly ambitious magic to undisciplined minds. Durmstrang has cultivated a reputation both fearsome and deserved. The institution makes no apologies for its inclusion of the dark arts in its curriculum, teaching not merely defense against such magic but its actual practice and theory. This approach, predictably, has generated considerable controversy within the international wizarding community. British wizards express particular horror at Durmstrang's methodology, conveniently forgetting that until recently, defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts was taught by a succession of incompetents, frauds, and individuals who were, in point of fact, practitioners of the very magic they purported to defend against. At least Durmstrang possesses the integrity to acknowledge what it teaches. The castle itself reflects this philosophical commitment to uncompromising pursuit of magical power. Built from dark stone that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, the structure sprawls across its mountainous foundation with a purposeful menace. The interior maintains temperatures that would be considered uninhabitable by those accustomed to southern climates. A deliberate choice meant to foster resilience and eliminate weakness. Students learn to conjure heat, protect themselves through magic, and function in conditions of discomfort. Practical skills that prove far more useful than the ability to levitate a feather with excessive flourish. Under the leadership of Igor Karkrafontil, his rather ignominious departure and subsequent demise, which I shall not detail as I find the recounting of his cowardice tedious, and later headmasters, whose identities have been kept deliberately obscure. Durmstrang has produced graduates of exceptional magical ability. The school's most infamous alumnus, Gellert Grindelwald, requires no introduction, though it bears mentioning that he was expelled from Durmstrang for conducting experiments judged too dangerous even by their liberal standards of fact. That should provide some perspective on the nature of their normal curriculum. The student body, drawn from northern and eastern European countries, wears robes of blood red, trimmed with fur practical for the climate, intimidating in appearance, and deliberately chosen to project an image of strength. Unlike Hogwarts' house system, Durmstrang organizes students into groups based on year and area of magical specialization, fostering a more competitive and less communal environment. This approach produces graduates who excel individually but struggle with collaborative magic, a weakness offset by their general superiority in dueling and combatives. By the school's library, while smaller than Hogwarts, contains texts that would cause the British Ministry of Magic to suffer collective apoplexy. Grimoires detailing curse construction, treatises on Horcrux creation, though these are restricted even at Durmstrang, and comprehensive studies of inferi animation sit alongside more conventional magical texts. Students graduate with a theoretical and practical knowledge of dark magic that makes them either dangerous enemies or invaluable allies, depending upon one's perspective and political alignments. Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. By across the Atlantic, in the Massachusetts region of North America, stands Ilvermorny, relative newcomer to the world of magical education. Founded only in the 17th century by Isolde Serre, an Irish witch who fled to the New World to escape her aunt, Gormlaith Gaunt. Yes, that Gaunt family, the same bloodline that would later produce the founder of Slytherin House, and several centuries hence, individuals whose names I shall not speak in this context. The founding of Ilvermorny reads like a tale designed to inspire the simple-minded, full of triumph over adversity and cooperation between cultures. Isolde, having escaped her murderous aunt's control, encountered a Pukwudgie named William and befriended two young Muggle boys, James Stewart and his brother, whom she raised and later married James, not the brother, obviously, together with a horned serpent she had rescued as a fragment of its horn. They established a school intended to bring magical education to the children of North America. The school building itself, constructed from Mount Greylock granite through a combination of magic and no magic, American term for Muggles, as if renaming them somehow changes their nature labor, rises from the mountain in elegant tiers. The architecture blends European magical tradition with indigenous American magical practices, creating something distinctly different from its European counterparts. For houses, named for magical creatures significant to the founder's horned serpent, representing the mind, Wampus, representing the warrior, Pukwudgie, representing the heart, and Thunderbird, representing the soul-divide students, in a manner superficially similar to Hogwarts, but with notably different selection criteria. The sorting ceremony at Ilvermorny involves standing in the center of a circular room, while carved representations of the 4 house symbols react to the student's presence. If multiple houses wish to claim a student, the choice falls to the individualer, more democratic approach than Hogwarts' method. Though whether democracy in house assignment produces superior results remains debatable. What distinguishes Ilvermorny most significantly from European institutions is its approach to wand lore and magical theory. American wizards developed independently of European magical traditions for several centuries, resulting in variations in technique and philosophy. Ilvermorny emphasizes practical magic and self-sufficiency to a degree uncommon in European schools. Students learn wilderness survival, magical creature handling in environments ranging from Arctic to tropical, and defensive magic adapted to threats specific to North America. Thunderbirds hide behind creatures and other magical fauna unknown or extinct in Europe. The school's approach to blood status proves refreshingly pragmatic compared to European obsessions with purity. Perhaps the frontier nature of American magical society made such concerns impractical. Or perhaps the founders' experiences, having suffered at the hands of a blood supremacist. James having been born a no-mag-influenced institutional philosophy. Regardless, Ilvermorny accepts students of Muggle parentage, mixed heritage, and pure magical bloodlines with equal consideration, focusing instead on magical ability and potential. The faculty at Ilvermorny includes specialists in subjects rarely taught at European institutions: Native American magical traditions, magical cryptozoology, focusing on North American species, an advanced study of wandless magic, which certain indigenous magical cultures perfected long before European wizards arrived with their wooden sticks and superior attitudes. This curriculum produces graduates with a broader, if less deep, magical education compared to European specialists. In the heart of the Brazilian rainforest, concealed from Muggle detection by wards so powerful they render the surrounding jungle impassable to non-magical beings, stands Castellabruxo, a castle of golden stone that appears, to the rare Muggle who glimpses it from a distance, as nothing more than a picturesque ruin. This illusion, maintained through collaborative effort by the faculty and senior students, represents merely the outermost layer of protections surrounding South America's preeminent magical academy. Founded in the 16th century, the exact date lost to history, as record-keeping in magical communities often falls victim to spell damage, political upheaval, and the simple passage of time. Castellabruxo serves students from across South America, including Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Peru, and most other nations on the continent. The student population, consequently, speaks Portuguese, Spanish, and various indigenous languages, creating a linguistic diversity that makes the mere 2 or 3 languages spoken at Hogwarts seem provincial by comparison. The castle itself integrates into the rainforest rather than dominating it, with buildings connected by open-air corridors and courtyards that blur the boundary between architecture and nature. Vines grow across walls, not from neglect but by design, their magical properties harvested for potions, ingredients. The greenhouses, though calling them greenhouses seems absurd when surrounded by one of the world's most biodiverse ecosystems, specialize in tropical magical plants, many species unknown to European herbologists who consider themselves experts despite never venturing beyond their climate-controlled conservatories. What truly distinguishes Castellabruxo is its approach to magical creature studies and herbology. The Amazon rainforest harbors magical species found nowhere else. forest spirits that protect fauna from hunters. Curapira, creatures with backward-facing feet that confuse trackers. And countless plant species with properties that would revolutionize potions brewing if European wizards could overcome their prejudice against primitive magical traditions. Students at Castello Bruxo grow up learning to navigate this environment, understanding the delicate balance between magical and non-magical ecosystems, and developing an intuitive connection to nature that cannot be taught through textbooks. The school maintains particular excellence in herbology and magazology, naturally, but also demonstrates surprising strength in potions. The combination of unique ingredient access and brewing techniques adapted to tropical temperatures produces results that challenge conventional European methodologies. I have personally examined Castello Bruxo brewing methods and found them, while unconventional, occasionally superior for specific potion types. Fact, I admit with considerable reluctance and absolutely no intention of explaining my access to such information. The faculty includes several experts in areas completely absent from European magical education: rainforest magic, river navigation under magical camouflage, and the integration of indigenous magical practices with European-style wand magic brought by colonizers. This combination creates a unique magical tradition, neither purely European nor purely indigenous, but something adapted to South American conditions and needs. Students at Castello Bruxo wear bright green robes, a practical choice given the environment, as they blend remarkably well with the surrounding foliage during outdoor lessons. The school's mascot, a Kaipora, reflects their deep connection to forest magic and creature care. Graduates typically pursue careers in magazoology, herbology, curse-breaking in ancient ruins scattered across South America, or conservation work protecting magical species threatened by Muggle deforestation and magical poachers alike. Mahoutokoro School of Magic is situated upon the volcanic island of Minami, Iwo Jima, in Japan. Mahoutokoro represents perhaps the smallest of the great magical schools by student population. Yet this diminutive size belies an institution of extraordinary rigor and ancient tradition. The school, whose name translates approximately to place of magic, perches upon the summit of the volcano itself, dormant for centuries but maintained in a state of careful magical suspension that prevents either full extinction or dangerous eruption. The castle, constructed from jade, seems to grow organically from the volcanic rock, its green walls shot through with veins of gold that glow softly at night. This architectural marvel serves not merely aesthetic purposes, but functions as an enormous magical focus, channeling the residual volcanic energy into the school's wards and enchantments. The building techniques employed remain closely guarded secrets, known only to Japanese magical architects who guard their craft with a protectiveness that makes Gringotts goblins seem forthcoming by comparison. What distinguishes Mahoutokoro most dramatically from other magical institutions is its day student program. Rather than housing students for the academic year, the school employs a massive flock of trained storm petrels, magical birds of considerable size and intelligence that transport students to and from their homes each day. This journey, covering distances that would be impossible for ordinary birds, occurs through a combination of apparition-like magic and accelerated flight, that students describe as simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying, though whether the terror stems from the journey itself or the consequences of tardiness remains unclear. Japanese magical education emphasizes discipline, precision, and the pursuit of perfection in spellwork, to a degree that makes even the strictest European professors seem lenient. Students begin their magical education at age 7, earlier than most other schools, wearing enchanted robes that grow with them and change color to reflect their academic progress and achievements. Beginning students wear pale pink robes that gradually deepen to gold as they demonstrate increasing skill. Exceptional students earn white robes, while those who disgrace themselves through rule-breaking or poor performance find their robes turning white for different reasons, marking them as failures until they can redeem themselves, or, in extreme cases, face expulsion. This system of public accountability through visual markers creates an intensely competitive environment. Students work with a determination rarely seen in European schools, where mediocrity often goes unchallenged and coddled. Mahoutokoro graduates routinely demonstrate spell precision that surpasses their international peers, though some critics, predominantly European, naturally argue this emphasis on technical perfection comes at the expense of creativity and adaptability. The curriculum at Mahoutokoro includes subjects uncommon elsewhere. Magical martial arts, combining wandless magic with physical combat, trains students in a discipline that predates modern wand-based spellcasting. Calligraphy classes teach not merely artistic writing, but the crafting of spell sigils and protective wards through written characters and approach to magic, fundamentally different from the spoken incantations emphasized in European tradition. Advanced students study the integration of technology and magic, a field where Japanese wizards lead global innovation, despite the general magical community's suspicion of anything electrical. The school maintains the lowest rate of dark wizard production among all major magical institutions. Statistic Japanese magical authorities cite with considerable pride, whether this stems from their rigorous moral education, the public shame associated with the white robes of disgrace, or simply the efficiency with which Japanese magical law enforcement identifies and neutralizes threats, remains subject to debate. Regardless, Mahoutokoro graduates rarely appear in international registers of dark wizards or convicted criminals. Uagadou School of Magic. In the mountains of the Muna location, interpreted by some as the Rwenzori mountain range between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and by others as a deliberate mystification, as African wizards possess little patience for European cartographic obsessions, stands Uagadou, the largest magical school in the world. This institution, carved directly from the mountainside and enchanted to shift position periodically, serves students from across the African continent, accepting more students than any other magical academy, while maintaining educational standards that rival or surpass its international counterparts. The method by which Uagadou identifies and recruits students demonstrates magic of remarkable sophistication. Rather than sending letters via owl post, European affectation treated with bemused tolerance by other magical cultures, Uagadou dispatches dream messengers. These conjured spirits visit prospective students in their sleep, presenting them with a token, typically a carved stone inscribed with their name and the school's location. Students awaken holding this token, physical proof of a magical dream, and understand instinctively the choice before them. Those who accept rub the stone, which transforms into a lodestone that guides them to the school when the time comes. This recruitment method, operating across vast distances and multiple countries, requires mastery of dream magic that European wizards have largely abandoned as unreliable or dangerous. The fact that Uagadou has employed this technique successfully for over 1,000 years, the school claims founding in approximately the 10th century. Making it older than Hogwarts suggests African magical traditions possess depths European wizards rarely acknowledge. Being too consumed with their own supposed superiority to recognize alternatives, the school itself defies easy description, as its appearance varies depending upon the observer's cultural background and magical sensitivity. Some describe towering structures of stone decorated with intricate carvings depicting magical creatures and ancestral spirits. Others report seeing buildings that seem woven from living plants, structures that breathe and grow. This perceptual variance likely stems from the integration of multiple African magical traditions, each contributing different architectural philosophies and enchantment styles to create something uniquely adaptable. Uagadou's greatest distinction lies in its emphasis on wandless magic and transfiguration. While European wizards clutch their wands like security blankets, incapable of the simplest spell without them, Uagadou students routinely perform complex magic through gestures, astronomical alignments, and sheer force of will. This approach, developed over centuries before European wandmakers forced their particular methodology upon the magical world, produces wizards of exceptional power and flexibility. A Uagadou graduate stripped of their wand remains dangerous. A Hogwarts graduate in similar circumstances becomes merely an unusually educated muggle. Their transfiguration program, considered the finest in the world even by European experts grudgingly admitting superiority elsewhere, produces animagi at a rate that would alarm the British Ministry of Magic if they possessed the competence to monitor international magical developments. Students learn human-to-animal transformation as part of standard curriculum, treating as routine what European magical authorities consider so dangerous they require registration and extensive regulation. This casual mastery of advanced transfiguration extends to other area students. Regularly transfigure materials for construction, transform landscapes for agricultural purposes, and employ metamorphosis in ways European wizards reserve for emergencies or specialized careers. The faculty at Uagadou includes masters of magical disciplines unknown or underdeveloped elsewhere. Professors of stellar magic teach navigation and spellcasting based on astronomical phenomena, a field European wizards abandoned after the medieval period despite its documented effectiveness. Experts in earth magic drawing power from the land itself rather than merely casting spells upon it instruct. Students in sustainable magical practices that prevent the environmental degradation common around European magical settlements. Specialists in ancestral magic maintain connections between living wizards and the accumulated knowledge of deceased practitioners, creating a continuity of magical tradition that European culture's fear of death prevents from developing similarly. Students at Uagadou wear robes of their choosing, dyed in colors meaningful to their family or tribal traditions, creating a vibrant visual diversity absent from the uniformity enforced elsewhere. The school maintains no house system, instead organizing students by age and area of study while fostering a collective identity as Uagadou students, regardless of national origin or cultural background. This approach, prioritizing African magical unity over tribal or national divisions, reflects both practical necessity, given the student body's geographic dispersal, and philosophical commitment to Pan-African magical cooperation. Graduates of Uagadou can be found throughout the African continent, and increasingly in international magical organizations, where their wandless magic and transfiguration expertise make them invaluable. They staff the magical governments of dozens of nations, lead research into magical theory that challenges European assumptions, and quietly demonstrate that British magical education, for all its vaunted history, represents merely one approach among many, and not necessarily the superior one. In the frozen expanses of Russia, nation whose magical community remains as vast and inscrutable as its Muggle counterpart exists, Beauxbatons, a school about which distressingly little reliable information penetrates beyond its borders. Russian wizards maintain a cultural tendency toward secrecy that makes even the most paranoid British purebloods seem transparent by comparison. What scraps of knowledge exist come primarily from international magical competitions, brief mentions in historical texts, and the occasional defector willing to discuss their education before suffering unfortunate accidents that Russian magical authorities assure us bear no connection to breaches of confidentiality. The school apparently occupies a location somewhere in the Russian wilderness, protected by Fidelius charms, so complex they prevent even former students from revealing its precise location unless they serve as secret keeper position, rotated among senior faculty according to schedules known only to the school's administration. This level of security suggests either paranoia bordering on pathological, or the protection of something valuable enough to warrant such extreme measures. Given Russian magical history, both explanations remain plausible. What we know with relative certainty is that Beauxbatons specializes in subjects reflecting Russia's harsh climate and political history. Students reportedly receive extensive training in defensive magic, not merely against spells, but against environmental hazards, magical and mundane. Extreme cold, capable of freezing spells, and the various dangerous creatures inhabiting Siberian wastes. The curriculum apparently includes substantial study of dark arts, rivaling or exceeding even Durmstrang's commitment to teaching offensive magic, though Russian authorities deny this with a vehemence that only reinforces suspicion. The school's approach to transfiguration emphasizes practical applications suited to their environment, conjuring shelter from ice, transforming snow into usable materials, and allegedly teaching students to assume cold-resistant animagus forms, though this remains unconfirmed speculation. Their potions program focuses heavily on remedies for cold weather afflictions, antidotes to various poisons favored by Russian dark wizards, and according to unsubstantiated rumors, substances that would violate numerous international magical statutes if their existence could be proven. Beauxbatons students gain admission through a process involving magical aptitude testing, and some claim family background checks more thorough than those conducted for Ministry of Magic positions in most other countries. The student body, drawn exclusively from Russia and former Soviet magical communities, reportedly wears uniforms of deep blue trimmed with silver fox fur, practical for the climate and intimidating in appearance, suggesting they learned something from Durmstrang's approach to institutional image. The school maintains a Quidditch program, though they play on brooms enchanted to function in extreme cold, and apparently employ rules modifications accounting for visibility issues during blizzards. More notably, Beauxbatons pioneered an alternative sport called Pogby, involving aerial combat on enchanted logs rather than broomser development that European magical sports authorities refuse to recognize officially, while privately acknowledging requires considerable skill and borderline suicidal courage. Graduates of Beauxbatons appear throughout Russian magical government and with increasing frequency in international dark wizard rosters, though correlation should not be confused with causation, and Russian magical authorities point out with some justification that British magical education produced Voldemort, so perhaps England might consider its own house before casting stones at others. The School of Magic in Brazil's second institution. Yes, before you ask, with that predictable confusion clouding your expression. Brazil maintains a second major magical academy, in addition to Castelo Bruxos. This southern institution, whose name varies depending upon which Brazilian magical community one consults. Some call it Academia de Magia Sul. Others refer to it simply as the Southern School, serves the magical population of Brazil's southern regions, areas whose climate, culture, and magical traditions differ substantially from the tropical north. Located in the southern highlands, possibly in the Serra Geral mountain range, though precise location remains deliberately vague. This school operates from a complex of buildings constructed in a style blending Portuguese colonial architecture with indigenous magical design. The institution arose from practical necessity. Brazil's vast size made a single school inadequate for serving its entire magical population, particularly given the challenges of magical transportation across distances that dwarf the entirety of Britain several times over. The Southern School emphasizes different magical specialties than its northern counterpart. Rather than tropical herbology and rainforest creature care, this institution focuses on temperate magical plants, grassland ecosystem management, and the handling of magical species adapted to cooler climate. Their potions program developed independently of Castelo Bruxos' approach, creating a distinct Brazilian magical tradition that demonstrates the same split visible in Muggle Brazilian culture between northern and southern regions. Students at the Southern School study advanced weather magic a necessity in regions prone to both flooding and drought, where proper crop yields often depend upon subtle magical intervention in precipitation patterns. They learn sophisticated protective enchantments against crop pests, both magical and mundane, and develop expertise in earth magic that would impress even Uagadou's specialists. The curriculum includes substantial focus on magical economics and trade, reflecting the commercial importance of southern Brazilian agriculture to both magical and Muggle economies. The relationship between Brazil's two major schools occasionally generates tension, with each institution claiming superiority in different areas, while grudgingly acknowledging the other's necessary existence. This dynamic creates a healthy competition that drives both schools toward excellence. Though Brazilian magical authorities regularly mediate disputes over student recruitment boundaries, resource allocation, and which institution deserves credit for particularly distinguished graduates, the Australian School of Sorcery, the vast Australian outback, far from Muggle population centers and their tiresome tendency to stumble into areas they shouldn't, exists an institution whose name has been so thoroughly protected by Fidelius charms and similar enchantments that most international magical references simply call it the Australian School. The exact name, location, and many operational details remain known only to Australians and those few international visitors. Granted access through proper diplomatic channels, a category that has historically excluded most British wizards due to lingering resentment over certain colonial-era magical policies, I shall not detail. What can be confirmed is that this school serves the magical population of Australia and New Zealand, drawing students from both countries plus various Pacific Island magical communities too small to maintain their own institutions. The school incorporates Aboriginal magical traditions, some of the world's oldest continuous magical practices, with European-style wand magic, introduced during colonization, creating a unique synthesis that produces graduates with unusual versatility. The Australian magical education system places extraordinary emphasis on survival skills and practical magic suited to their environment. Students learn to navigate the outback using magical and non-magical methods, handle the continent's remarkably dangerous magical creatures. Australia harbors more species capable of killing wizards than perhaps any landmass, except certain regions of Africa, and perform magic under conditions of extreme heat and water scarcity that would incapacitate wizards trained in gentler climate. The curriculum apparently includes extensive study of magical creatures. Naturally, given that Australian magical fauna includes some of the most bizarre and deadly species on the planet, students learn not merely to defend against these creatures, but to understand and work with them, reflecting Aboriginal magical philosophy, emphasizing cooperation with nature rather than domination over it. This approach produces magizologists of exceptional skill, though they tend toward specializations in venomous creatures, desert adaptation, and extreme environment magic, rather than the more conventional focuses common among European graduates. Australian magical education also emphasizes what they term distance magic, tasting, and communication across the vast spaces separating Australian magical communities. Students graduate with unusual proficiency in long-range communication charms, transportation magic adapted to crossing hundreds of miles of hostile terrain, and protective enchantments that function reliably despite the harsh environmental conditions that degrade European-style wards with frustrating speed. The school's Quidditch program operates under rules modified for extreme heat and the occasional dust storm, producing players of exceptional resilience, if not always refined technique. More uniquely, they maintain a program in Woomera racing, involving enchanted throwing sticks used in a sport that predates European contact and demonstrates Aboriginal magical traditions, continuing influence on Australian magical culture. The Institute of Magic in Egypt, cradle of one of humanity's oldest civilizations, naturally maintains magical educational traditions extending back millennia. The primary institution, serving modern Egyptian wizards, operates from a location somewhere along the Nile speculation centers on Luxor, or the Valley of the Kings. Though Egyptian magical authorities neither confirm nor deny such guesses and incorporate magical knowledge spanning from ancient Egyptian practices through Islamic magical traditions to contemporary international magical standards. This school, variously called the Institute, the Academy of the Nile, or by names in Arabic that resist easy translation, occupies buildings that appear to Muggles as picturesque ruins. The architecture combines ancient Egyptian design massive stone structures, decorated with hieroglyphic spells that remain active after thousands of years, with more recent additions reflecting various periods of Egyptian magical history. The result creates a visual timeline of magical architectural evolution, more comprehensive than any museum could achieve. The curriculum emphasizes subjects drawing upon Egypt's unique magical heritage. Students study ancient curse-breaking, a field where Egyptian expertise remains unmatched given their ancestors' enthusiasm for protecting tombs with magical defenses of legendary complexity and lethality. They learn hieroglyphic spellcasting, a method of magic that predates wand use by millennia and functions through written symbols imbued with power through proper pronunciation and intention. Magic that makes European wizards' dependence on spoken Latin seem almost primitive by comparison. Egyptian magical education includes substantial focus on funerary magic and the proper treatment of the deader subject. British wizards consider dark or morbid, but which Egyptians recognize as essential for maintaining the balance between living and deceased magical practitioners. Students learn to communicate with spirits, maintain protective wards around burial sites, and recognize when ancient magical defenses have been disturbed by tomb robbers or curse breakers operating without proper authorization. The potions program reflects thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, including formulas recorded on papyrus scrolls that predate the founding of Hogwarts by millennia. Egyptian potions masters work with ingredients harvested from the Nile ecosystem, desert plants with properties unknown to European herbologists, and preserved materials from magical creatures that went extinct centuries ago, but whose remains retain potency when properly stored through techniques Egyptian embalmers perfected. The school maintains particular excellence in astronomy, building upon ancient Egyptian astronomical knowledge, while incorporating modern magical understanding. Students learn to cast spells aligned with stellar phenomena, predict magical events through astronomical calculation, and employ star charts for purposes ranging from navigation to prophecy. This emphasis on celestial magic produces graduates whose understanding of astronomical influences on spellwork surpasses what most European wizards achieve in a lifetime of study. Egyptian magical students wear robes of white linen in traditional style, practically suited to the climate and aesthetically connecting them to thousands of years of magical tradition. The school maintains no house system in the European sense, but organizes students by area of specialization: curse-breaking, funerary magic, hieroglyphic studies, and so forth, allowing earlier focus on career preparation than the more general European approach permits. Graduates of the Egyptian Institute dominate the field of international curse-breaking. Staff Gringotts Egyptian operations almost exclusively, and maintain the tombs and magical sites throughout Egypt with a professionalism that prevents the catastrophic ward failures and curse releases that plagued earlier periods when British curse-breakers operated with more enthusiasm than expertise. These 10 institutions, then, represent the pillars of magical education beyond Hogwarts walls. Each reflects its culture's magical traditions, environmental necessities, and philosophical approaches to power and knowledge. Each produces graduates with strengths and weaknesses shaped by their training, creating the diversity of magical practice visible across the international wizarding community. Be arrogance of British magical culture and, yes, I acknowledge British magical culture, despite being immersed in it. Perhaps because of that, immersion leads many to assume Hogwarts represents the pinnacle of magical education. This assumption crumbles upon examination of these alternatives, each excelling in areas where Hogwarts merely dabbles or ignores entirely. Uagadou's wonderless magic, Mahoutokoro's precision, Costello Bruxo's herbological expertise, the Egyptian Institute's ancient knowledge, the Australian school's survival magic. These specializations demonstrate that excellence takes many forms, and British magical merishrux represents merely one approach. Present a leb to buo present per mes a stepis puberen with the map of road ababo where bill of sa a poof up the broader implication, which I suspect will escape those of limited perception, is that the magical world's diversity in education produces a richer, more varied, global magical community than any single tradition could achieve. The competition between schools drives innovation. The different philosophical approaches prevent stagnation. Even the tensions and rivalries serve purposes, forcing each institution to defend its methods and prove its worth through results rather than mere appeals to tradition. Of course, this diversity also creates challenges. International magical cooperation suffers when graduates of different institutions struggle to understand each other's approaches, Durmstrang-trained wizards view magic as power to be seized and wielded. Uagadou graduates see it as a force to be harmonized with. Mahoutokoro students pursue perfection in technique. Ilvermorny alumni emphasize practical adaptability. These philosophical differences occasionally manifest in conflicts ranging from academic debates to actual combat, particularly when political tensions align with educational rivalries. The International Confederation of Wizards attempts to mediate these differences and establish common standards, with predictable lack of complete success. How does one create universal educational benchmarks when the schools themselves cannot agree on fundamental questions? Should dark arts be taught or forbidden? Is wandless magic superior to wand-based casting? Should students specialize early or receive broad general education? These debates continue across decades without resolution, each school defending its approach with arguments ranging from philosophical to practical to simply traditional. For students seeking magical education, the choice of school when choice exists, as many attend whichever institution serves their region shapes, not merely their magical abilities, but their entire worldview. A Hogwarts graduate and a Ilvermorny graduate may both be competent wizards, but they will approach problems differently, value different aspects of magical knowledge, and maintain different assumptions about magic's proper role in society. This diversity of perspective enriches the magical world, even as it complicates efforts toward unity and cooperation. I trust this comprehensive examination of the 10 great schools beyond Hogwarts has adequately addressed your query, though I harbor no illusions that every nuance has been absorbed. These institutions represent centuries of magical tradition, countless generations of students and faculty, and the accumulated magical knowledge of civilizations spanning the globe. To truly understand them requires more than mere recitation of facts. It demands recognition that magical excellence manifests in many forms, and that British magical education, despite its considerable achievements, holds no monopoly on wisdom, power, or the proper approach to teaching magic. Now, unless you have further questions requiring equally extensive responses, I suggest you consider what you have learned and reflect upon the broader implications regarding magical education, cultural diversity in magical practice, and the arrogance of assuming one's own tradition represents the apex of achievement. These lessons, properly internalized, prove more valuable than any specific spell or potion formula, though I suspect such philosophical considerations may prove challenging for some minds. A measured pause, followed by the faint rustle of robes as I dismiss this topic from immediate consideration. The information presented should prove more than adequate for whatever purposes you require, though I advise careful fact-checking of any details regarding the more secretive institutions. Russian and Australian magical authorities do not appreciate foreigners spreading information about their schools, accurate or otherwise, and Egyptian curse-breakers have been known to take professional offense at misrepresentations of their training. Consider yourself warned.